Okay, I was born in December 25, 1925, in Užhorod, Czechoslovakia. We had a normal middle-income family. My parents were religious people. They were Orthodox Jews, followed all the rules and what Jewish people were supposed to do, observing holidays, and my father did a lot of charity work too. It was Czechoslovakia until 1938. In 1938, my home was changed, the borders, and it became Hungary. So we had to change schools from Czech schools to Hungarian schools. We spoke both languages. Our language at home was Hungarian. The Hungarians were not as good as the Czech people. We started seeing more anti-Semitism around. And slowly different rules came in. Like my father had to take in a partner in his business who wasn't Jewish, because Jewish people were not allowed to own businesses. Then, after a while, we had a curfew. We were not allowed on the streets after a certain time. The Hungarian school expelled us. We couldn't go there anymore. That was no problem because there was a Hebrew gymnasium in town. And that was actually beneficial to us because we learned Hebrew and we learned English. In the Hungarian school, we learned Hungarian. Then the law came in that we had to wear a yellow star to be recognized when we were out on the street, and people could make fun of us. And I showed their anti-Semitism. Shortly after that, there were notices that we are going to be taken to a farm in Hungary to work, so we should prepare ourselves with food and our clothing, and we'll be deported to these farms. We believed that it was farms that we were going to. One day they came, the Hungarian police, with guns and forced us out of our houses and marched us down the street to a ghetto where tents were set up for us with straw on the floor where we could sleep. The only food we had was what we could carry with us from home. We were at the ghetto for, my time is not exact, but I think a few weeks. And then we were told that they are going to take us to the farm. They marched us again down to the railroad, put us into the railroad cars that were meant to be for animals and not human beings. There were so many people in a cart that we couldn't actually lie down. We could just stand up or sit down on the floor. That happened on May 16th, 1944. And the trip took 3 days, and that's when my father realized that we're not going to any farms, because we were headed towards Poland, where the camp was, Auschwitz. We younger people really didn't know much about any of it, but my father used to listen to the BBC and get the truth from there, because you couldn't, if you listened to the Hungarian news, all you heard about how the Germans are winning the war. when we got to Auschwitz, they got us out of the carts. Some of the prisoners were there with striped suits, and they were telling some of the people, eat everything you have because they will take it from you. When we got out of the railroad cars, we lined up and they started separating first the men from the women. So my father and my brother went on one side, and my sister and my mother on the other side. I never saw my father again. Then they started separating the women. They separated them according to ages. All the older people with little children went to one side, and the younger people to the other side. And little babies went with the older people. And they told us that we're going for a shower, and being the older people couldn't walk that far, they put them on a truck and took them on a truck to the shower. We told our mother we'll see her later after she gets her shower and we get our shower. Well, we never saw our mother again because the older people and the little children were taken to the place where the showers were, but instead of showers, they got gas. They were killed. And after they were killed in the gas chambers, then they were put into a crematorium, which we saw the flames and smoke when we got to Auschwitz, but we didn't know what they were. We found out later. The younger people, we were taken and we actually got a shower. Our hair was shaved. They told us to put our possessions in order on the side of the room, because when we get done with the shower, we'll get everything back. Well, that was another lie, because after we got the shower and shaved our hair, they gave us a prisoner's dress with the numbers on the dress. That's all we had, is a straight gray dress, and then they gave us a blanket that was serving for a coat when it got cold, and at night as a blanket. Of course, when it rained and the blankets got wet, we had nothing to get warm with. We, after all that was done, then they took us to the barracks. And every morning they woke us up early and counted us. And we were outside huddling after the counting was done when it was cold, because the weather was still cold over there. On the way to the showers, I saw many old people with beards in the gutters. They were either dead or close to death. I don't know if they were shot or whether they just died of exhaustion. But we were like in a daze, because we never even heard of a place like that. As far as we knew, we were going to work on a farm. At the barracks, we got 2 tiers, like bunks. Each one was about as big as a single bed, and 6 girls were on each bunk. So we couldn't lie down, we could only sit. If you did anything wrong, there was somebody to hit you with a switch. when we asked about when will we see our parents, they were very cruel about it, and they said, "You'll never see your parents again. They are dead." They gave us a piece of bread that looked like a piece of brick. We didn't even know what it was. And then they took us to, for a few mornings, to a place where there was a factory, but shortly after we got there, there was some bombing, and the place was bombed out. So from there, they took us to another place. The name of the town was Essen, and we worked at the Croup Factory. The Croup Factory was owned by a dynasty of the Croup family. They are still in business. The treatments were terrible because all our guards were SS people. They were trained to be cruel. Death didn't mean anything to them. I think in a way they enjoyed it, torturing people and mistreating them. And they didn't need too much of a reason to do that. At the factory, some of the work was very hard. The girls, some of them had to carry these sheet metals, and when it was cold, their fingers almost froze with the sheet metal. One German man gave one of the girls a pair of gloves, and when the SS man saw it, he grabbed the gloves from her, threw it in the fire in the oven, and hit the girl for accepting the gloves. And all of this cruelty we saw all the time. We were, when we first got there, we had transportation to the railroad, to the factories, but then as the bombs were more and more often, we had to march to work. And it was from early in the morning to late at night. When we got back to the camp, we got a piece of bread, like I told you, was like a piece of brick, and we got a soup that was made out of potato peelings and cabbage. And that's what we lived on. At one point, one of the guards found out that I can draw portraits, so he used to, a few of them brought in their pictures of their families and had me draw their pictures. Those days I could stay in, and I maybe got an extra piece of bread. Then the work that I was doing, I hurt my finger. It was badly infected. They cut it, and it never got to be right, so my drawing was finished. It's a little better now. As the time went on, there was no way of us to clean ourselves or to do anything that normal people do. The word later got around that the war was getting closer to the end, and the Germans weren't doing so well. One of the SS men would tell us, he said, "It doesn't matter who wins the war, we'll always have enough time to kill you." One German man he had a garden at home, and he used to bring a carrot or an onion or something, some vegetable, and give it to some of the girls. He also told one of the girls that if we ever have a chance to escape, he would help us. So at that point, we started to plan on an escape. Because going back to Auschwitz only meant one thing. Since they didn't need any more people to work, it was death that would be our fate. Well, we wanted to survive. And we started planning on our escape. At one point, they brought in some clothing that was taken from the people that they brought in, the Jewish people, and they let us have it. So we had civilian clothes with a yellow star on it. So we took the star off, because we wouldn't want to get on the street with a yellow star that would give us away right away. So we realized that when the bombing was going on, all our guards went into their shelter. We did not have a shelter. We were outside watching the bombs falling. It was like fireworks on 4th of July, but it was killing people. So then we said, well, the best time for us to plan an escape would be during a bombing, because the guards would not be out there. And as time went on, we finally said, it sounds like the war is getting to the end. We better make our escape. And one night we said, it's tonight or never. And the way I remember, we just opened the gate and walked out. And we walked around for quite a while before we came upon a Jewish cemetery that was all bombed out. And there was the remains of a building, the cellar. So we went down into the cellar to hide. And during the time that we were planning this, we would take a piece of our bread and eat some of it and save some of it. So when we were out, we didn't know where we wind up with, so we took with us some bread, but not all of a sudden, we ate it all, and there was no more left. So we said, well, it's time to contact the men that promised to help us. And at the time, he told the girl that he said, if we escape, he will help. He told her approximately where he lived. So one night, two of the girls went and looked him up. He was in kind of a shock when he saw them, because he never thought that we would actually have the courage to do it. But he kept his word, and every night he came and brought us a boiled potato and some water. So for a few weeks we lived on a potato and water. Of course, at that time we thought a boiled potato was the best thing you could ever eat. And we stayed there. One day, we were right in front of the cellar, and one day I said to the girls, we would probably be safer if we go deeper into the cellar in case somebody comes down here. Well, that night, we moved further in, and that night, the place where we were before caved in during a bombing. It was like a miracle. And then later, a German guard came down. He was guarding some Russian prisoners of war, and he found us there. And he said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Well, we gave him a story that our parents are out looking for an apartment because we were bombed out someplace. And we spoke German pretty well. So he left. But then when we told the man who was bringing us the potato, he said, "Well, really, we don't know if he believed you. He might be back with some other guards. You're not safe here anymore." So he took us to a little garden that he had outside of the town with a little cottage, and we were hiding there for a short time because the front was getting so close that we could actually hear shotguns, a lot of shooting. So he realized that that was not a safe place anymore either. So he got some friends together and he found a German merchant who had a grocery store, and he took 4 of us in. He opened his house for us, and he had a housekeeper because his family was in the country. The country was safer than the cities where the bombings were. And he gave us a room. He told us we can use his daughter's clothes. And the housekeeper had a meal for us all the time. He was a very, very nice man. And we stayed at his house until we looked out and we saw some different uniforms. Well, it turned out to be it was the American soldiers. We were liberated finally, and we could go out and be free. We went out when they were marching in, and we welcomed them. And Germans were like, "We're welcoming the enemy." They didn't realize they were not our enemies, they were their enemies. And so we were free. We went and applied. We didn't want to go back to any camps anymore because there were some, after the war, they set up some camps for immigrants, homeless people that we were at the time. We went, being we spoke some English, we went to the British government, the occupational government, and we got jobs. We got jobs as translators and interpreters, and we worked there. Then at one time we were thinking of, there was a transport going back to Czechoslovakia, so we signed up for it. And the officer who was organizing it, he said, "No problem with you going back, but I do have to tell you, there's no guarantee that you can get out of there because it's Russian occupied." Well, when we heard that, we said, "I don't think so. We're not risking to be under the Russian occupation." And we stayed and we didn't go. So then we worked in an officers' country club, and then we decided to move to the American zone because we wanted to come to the United States. And from there, we wound up in this country where we were very glad that we could do it. And I married an American in Germany, and I came back to to America with him. And I have 5 children, and it looks like I'm here to tell people what really happened, because there are a lot of people that deny the Holocaust. They say it never happened. And there are some survivors that can prove it that it happened, and it can happen again if we're not careful. And then, of course, with Israel, we feel that much safer that there's somebody there that would talk up for us. Back there, nobody wanted to hear about us. They accepted the story that it was propaganda, which it wasn't. It really happened. So I could tell you about the horrors that I saw at the camp, but it's not a pleasant subject. I'm glad that I'm a free citizen in this country.
That on, you can be seated.
Pardon?
You can keep that on. We'll open it up for questions now.
Okay.
We'll have a roving mic here.
Oops.
I'll get it.
Thank you. It's a little cold in here, especially when you get to my age, you're more cold.
Of course, that's because it's Florida. Florida, it's always cold.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Okay, your question was, what type of business did your dad have?
He had a furniture business.
Did he make it or sell it?
Retail. No, he had a factory that was making his furniture, and he was very successful. So we had a very pleasant life until things changed.
When he had to take on a partner, as you spoke about, that he couldn't own a business, he had to take on a partner. Did he just have to give him stuff? I assume they didn't invest in anything. It was just, here, you're stuck with this person that you've got to take care of as well?
It was what?
Okay, he was asking about when he was forced to partner with someone else. How did that affect things? Was it in the same business, and did he have to?
Well, he managed to get a partner who was a very friendly man. Actually, he was one of the manufacturers of the furniture.
Okay.
So it wasn't that bad.
Okay, so it was a good working
We
relationship.
still could live a normal life.
You mentioned a sister. Whatever happened to your sister?
My sister was with me the whole time. And there was another set of sisters. One of them went to school with me, and they stayed with us the whole time too. So the four of us were always together. I think that probably helped, that we weren't alone.
It's actually miraculous
Yes.
that you were able to stay
That
together.
we were able to stay together.
There was one story in particular you said on how your sister arranged to make sure you were together. You want to tell them that?
That
When you were
was,
sick and when you were sick and how your sister was able to stay with you through that?
I still didn't get it.
When you were sick, maybe I should go on that
Oh,
side.
yeah. I got scarlet fever, and I was in a tent where they kept the sick people, and when they had enough for a transport, they would send them back to Auschwitz. Well, I was lying there, and all of a sudden I see my sister coming in with a big smile. I said, "What are you so happy about?" She says, "Well, we can be together again." And at one time when I stayed in the camp instead of going to work, and they rounded up all the people that were inside, we weren't feeling well. And the officer in charge went through and he said, tomorrow you go to work, tomorrow you go to work. When he came to me, he said, you can work in the camp. And I said, I can't. And he said, what? Why not? I said, because my sister works in the factory and I want to be with her. And he said, tomorrow you go out. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what they did with the girls that stayed in the camp and worked in the camp. I didn't want any part of that.
Right.
Even though it would have been much easier. But I didn't trust them.
Sure. And I might have missed it when I was running around back there. Did you mention about your brother?
Well, my brother, when he was liberated, he was in a camp in Belgium. And when in the camp, he got sick with typhoid fever. The nurses didn't even think that he will survive. But he got better, and they were going to send him to Sweden to recuperate. And they told him, he said, you're going to go to Sweden to get better. And he said, no, I can't go. And they said, why can't you go? He said, I promised my father that I'll take care of my sisters. So he didn't go. He went from camp to camp looking for us. He came to one camp and he was told by one girl, she said, yes, I remember those girls. They escaped and they were looking for them, and when they found them, they were shot.
Because that's what she was told. She was told that by the soldiers. By the
SS that's what the people that were in the same, because when they counted the group that worked there, and there were 6 girls missing, they went out looking, with the dogs, and, well, they never found us. So they went back and they told the girls that we have found the girls that escaped and we shot them. They are dead, which I'm still here.
So she told that to your brother.
And my brother, so when they told my brother that as far as they knew we were dead, he still kept looking. And he came to one camp, and the woman said, what's the girl's name? And he told her. And she said, well, there's a girl that works for us, and that's her name. And she took him to be reunited with my sister, and then they came to where we were working, and we got reunited with my brother.
And that's really miraculous as well. I mean, it's just so many miracles through the story.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was
I'm
18
going to repeat it for
when
the
I
microphone.
got
But how old
out
were
there.
you when you were taken in? Yeah.
Yeah, I was 18, and my sister was 16,
And your brother?
and my brother was 20. And my father actually worked with him for a short time. And then he had like an appendicitis. So one day when he came back from work, my father was gone. Because if you got sick, that was the end of you.
Okay, another question? Yes.
So you said that the babies went with the parents. Whatever happened to the babies?
Yes, okay. So you said like your mother, 46 or so, was considered old. They took
Yes.
her right away, unfortunately, and
And
very
my
sadly.
father was about the same age. He was also 46.
And then how about younger? So you were 17, your sister was
I was
16, you were 18, your sister
and
was
she
16.
was 16.
How about younger than that? What did they do with people younger than that?
Oh, the younger people were taken to the gas chambers and killed. little babies were killed, older people were killed.
When you say little babies, really anyone under,
I would say if, let's say, a girl looked older than her age, she might have survived. But if she was young and looked her age, then she did not survive.
so how old would she have to look
When after,
to not be taken to the gas chambers right away? How old would she have to look? 14 years old or so?
well, yeah, if she looked strong enough to work,
Okay,
that was the criteria, that you can work in factories.
okay. So if you looked like you were 13 or younger, you were taken right away.
Question, they separated everyone in lines. Was there ever any chance, like, let's say you got stuck in like a bad line, was there any chance to maybe kind of run over while nobody was
Okay.
looking?
When you were marching through town and other times when you were separated into lines and the older ladies were being taken, was there ever a chance for someone to skip out of line and join another line?
Yes, my sister tried to go with my mother because she was like in a dilemma. Shall I go with my sister or shall I go with my mother? But the man that was doing the separation pushed her back to the girls that were going to work. And by the way, the man that was separating people, supposedly we didn't know who he was, but later we found out that was Eichmann. I don't know if you heard about Eichmann. Yeah. And he was himself a murderer.
Okay.
I have two questions, and then one I want to ask you privately. So you escaped from the group, right? You and your six friends, well, the six of you total. Do you think that if you didn't escape, that you would have died?
Okay, yes. So what happened to the girls who did not escape?
I met a girl that was in the camp with us. She lives in Connecticut, and somehow she found out about me, and she got in touch with me, and then I could find out what really happened with the girls that stayed. They went on a march. They called it the Death March. They took them, they were on their way to Auschwitz, but they never made it to Auschwitz. They got to Belsen camp. And the SS men were not even allowed into the camp because there was typhus going around, and that's where my brother was, and that's where he got sick.
So many
So
of them died.
that was the death
Yeah.
march. A lot of
Like only 100 lived or something out of like thousands?
It was originally 500 of us, but supposedly only half of them survived because we were all in very weakened conditions. After a year not eating any decent food, we were weak.
That's among the group that she was with that had that death march, but there were other death marches.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, another question? You had a second question? Yeah.
Just a second. Okay, so like you lived through horrible loss. You lost your country, you lost your family, everything you owned. You went through all these horrible things that we can't even fathom. And I wanted to know, you personally, did you hold on to any anger? And if you did, how did you let it go? Or do you still have it? Or I mean, I can't even imagine.
Okay, the question is, in going through that tragedy, how has it affected you as far as anger and bitterness and feelings of revenge? How have you coped with that?
Well, I was very sad, very depressed, had nightmares, and yes, I blamed all those people that were doing all this. I can't say I have hate in my heart. I don't hate, but I could never forgive them for the killings. Now, there's also, you could say, when they say all about a certain nationality, how all the all the Germans are not bad. The Nazis were bad because there were some very good people among them. And that goes for everybody. Like they were in Germany, they were blaming that all the Jews caused all the problems of the country. Well, we know that was not the truth. So to hate a whole nation is the wrong thing.
Yeah, I'd like to specify here, elaborate a little bit more on this concept of forgiveness. And that's basically your question. How have you dealt with that and have you forgiven? Our general concept of forgiveness here in America is not a biblical basis of forgiveness. Generally, here in America, we have forgiveness as saying it's okay, don't worry about it, you're off the hook. There's this term, if the debt was forgiven, in other words, you don't have to pay back the debt. But that's not biblical forgiveness. Biblical forgiveness is saying that what you did was wrong, right? We don't forgive good people, right? If I said to you, I forgive you for what you did last week, you wouldn't be thinking about the gift you gave me, you'd be thinking about maybe the insult or something that you did to me. Right? So we only forgive wrongs. And so in saying forgiveness is saying that what you did was wrong, and I don't want you to ever do that again to me or anyone else, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that you don't do it to me or anyone else ever again, even if that means I need to call the police, take you to court, sue you, or whatever it takes, so that remuneration is done and justice is done. But at the same time, I am not going to hold on to anger, bitterness, wrath, revenge, and my reasoning for bringing justice to play is not out of revenge or spite, but out of justice. See, that's true forgiveness, biblical forgiveness. That's how God forgives us. See, a lot of people have a concept that God just forgives and so we can just continue doing what we've been doing and that he just lets everyone into heaven. That's not biblical forgiveness. He forgives everyone and he's already pre-forgiven everyone. But we only receive it by accepting his forgiveness and repenting and turning to Shuvah, turning away from our sins and having a changed heart by his power. And again, that's biblical forgiveness. God has already pre-forgiven us, so he doesn't hold on to anger. And then he gives us the ability to change. Now, with that same question, I'll come to, ties in with that, how about dealing with God? How did you feel towards God through that experience?
Well, I feel that God didn't make those people. You know, when I first got liberated and I was on my own, and I was questioning God. Why did he let this happen? How could he let 6 million people be murdered like they did? And the more I thought about it, I said, God did not make them do it. They did it on their own. God put you on this earth, and you're an independent being. You have free will. And if you do something that was wrong, I think you should be punished for it.
That is the best theological answer on why there's suffering, why bad things happen to good people. Everyone has free choice, and God allows them to make those choices, even if it affects us. But God will deal with justice, and God will deal with it in the end, and he'll sort it all out in the end. And this life is not the end as we trust in him and believe in him. And so that is. And so with that, we also, all of us here, have free choice as well in how we will deal with and how we will treat others and how we will deal with others that have hurt us and what we will do when we see others being hurt, whether we will speak up or not. Okay, question there.
Yeah, did the Germans ever give back anything?
Have the Germans ever given back anything to her or in general?
To people who got
Yes.
Yes, they have given back what they took, well, not what they took from us, because they can never return my parents to me.
But I'm saying, did they give back?
But they did do some restitution.
Yes, restitution, that's what I meant.
Germany has gone a long way in
Yes.
making restitution and has been very sensitive to the whole issue for many years now. They have some very nice Holocaust museums there, and some very nice Jewish museums there, and some very good monuments there. Germany has been very good, for the most part, over the history. Very recently, some changes are taking place in the population in Germany towards that issue. But now Poland is another story. Poland has been pretty horrible. There were many people who went back to Poland after the Holocaust, after the liberation, to try and find their homes, try and find their family, try and find other people. And their places were ransacked, taken, were not given back. Some places they killed the survivors who came back looking for relatives. And today, recently, within the last 2 months or so, the current Poland government has enacted a law that if anyone says that Poland had anything to do with the Holocaust, it's criminal offense and you can be put in jail. They put all the blame on the Nazis, not on Poland. And yet all the death camps, if not all of them, most of them, were in Poland, because it was really just a ripe area for it. Question there?
They were very helpful. They were very
They helped
helpful
the Nazis.
With the Nazis.
Yeah. And of course, that's not all Polish people. There was a Polish uprising.
And again, you can say all the Poles are like
Right,
that.
right. I know some
because
very
there's
many.
good and bad in every nation.
Yeah. We're talking generalities, right? And even with the Polish uprising in Warsaw Ghetto, where Jewish people were held for a long time, there was an uprising there in the Warsaw Ghetto by the Jews, and they tried to connect with the underground Polish people who were having an uprising as well, and they would not assist. They would not work together. They would not give any ammunition or to try and partner together. So I had this question now. Come on.
I wanted to know how long was the process from beginning to end, and were you able to go home?
Okay, the process in her life,
Yeah,
from when her family was first taken?
Yeah.
Yeah, how long did that process last for your family, from beginning to end?
Well, as soon as they were taken to Auschwitz, their life was over. My father lived for a short time, and then, like I said, my brother came back from work and he was gone. And fortunately, the German troops didn't come to Hungary till 1944. That was only 1 year from the end of the war. So the worst part only lasted the 1 year. If
For
it
Rene's
would have
family.
been longer, I probably wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Because
She never went back to
I
Czechoslovakia.
never, like I say, one time we signed up to go home, but it was under the the Russian occupation, and we didn't want any part of that, so we stayed in Germany, waiting to get a visa to the United States.
There was a
And-
question. Was a hand over there?
After your escape and liberation of the camps, did you have the names of the German men that helped you escape, and were you ever able to make contact with them?
Very good question. Asking, after liberation, was she able to have the names of the people who helped her and get in contact with them?
Well, we were in touch with them for a while. Then we moved into the American zone, and it became harder to. And some of them also wound up not living in the same place because the town that it all happened was completely destroyed.
Well, what did happen to one of your liberators you mentioned last night? That his name was placed in...
When we got liberated?
The people who liberated, the people who helped you, the man who helped your, the six women?
Well, like I say, we stayed with him for quite a while.
And then what happened with him after the war?
Oh, the man that helped us so much was in the Book of Righteous, who were not Jewish, the righteous people. And they named a street after him in Essen, which is a pretty good town, and he was recognized for his help that he did. In fact, I have a book that a German author wrote, and it's the name of the book is in German, and it's about the quiet heroes of Essen. Well, they were the quiet heroes because they did this out of the goodness of their heart. Because they really didn't agree with Hitler, but there was not much, at the end, there was not much they could have done. In the beginning, if they would have stood up for it, it could have changed. But once it was in full progress, you had to be a Nazi to survive. And like I said, he was just a great man. He and the other men who helped us with the potatoes, because basically they risked their lives to help us.
Do you know their names? Do you remember their names?
One was Marquardt, and the other one was Neerman,
Niemann and Mark.
Fritz Neerman.
One of them or both of them have a tree at Yad Vashem.
Yeah, I'm sure, yes.
Yeah. So
Yes, they do.
In the Israel Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, there's a forest that's been planted called the Garden of the Right, Garden of the Nations, the Righteous of the Nations. And next to each tree is a name of a person who risked their lives in helping Jewish people survive. And so there's a tree there named after him. Yes.
Did your children always know, or did you wait till they got to an older age to tell them what happened to you? Or was
Okay.
it just always something known and brought up, I guess, as they were growing
The question is, did she tell her children? I should have mentioned earlier, one of her daughters, Robin, is here with us tonight. We're thankful to have her here.
I didn't tell them much. When I first came to the States, I was still afraid of anti-Semitism. And I didn't want to burden my children with the terrible story that I had, because they were too young. As they got older, they learned about what I went through. And thank God I have my children. I have 5, and they are all wonderful children.
And this is very hard for you to talk about.
In the beginning, I couldn't talk about it. Plus I didn't think anybody really wanted to hear it. Then when I heard about some of these famous people coming up and saying that never happened, it's a story, it's not. I said somebody who was there has to speak up because we are witnesses. And that's why whenever I'm asked to go anywhere, to a school or whoever wants to hear it, I want them to know, yes, it did happen. And it also to fight any prejudice against anybody. And if we see some injustices done, we should speak up for them if we can. And that's the book, that if you want to help, there's always a way to do it. So don't look the other way and say, no, I can't do anything.
Yeah, the president of the Palestinian Liberation Army, he has his degree, I think his doctorate degree is in Holocaust denial. So, and then of course Iran, the leaders of Iran. So yes, so Rene doesn't enjoy telling this and speaking this out, but she feels a burden and a mission and a need to do that. I haven't gone this way yet, so I'll come back over this way. Yes.
Was he American that she married a liberator?
Your husband, he was in the army, an American, he was in the army, was he a liberator?
Well, he was among the liberators, yeah.
I was actually wondering, did you alternate between the camps and the factory? Did you have to walk between every single day, or did you switch one of these days and stay at the factory?
Okay, so initially you were taken to the camp, Auschwitz, and then you were transferred to the factory. Did you go back and forth between the camp and factory, or were you able to stay at the factory?
But before they picked us for the labor in the factories, they had us march around so they could pick. I remember one time they had us actually march in the nude. And we were young girls, very protective lives at home. And we lost everything. They had no conscience of what they were doing. And supposedly that they picked the two other sisters, and that she went to the man and said, please let these two girls go with us.
That's how the three were.
And that's how we stayed, the four of us stayed together the whole time.
Which is amazing, Yes.
Once you're liberated and everything, I mean, you get starved and all that, what happens? I mean, is it just, I never understood, just like,
Sure.
where do you go? What happens?
What happened in your mind and your thinking when you were free, and then what took place?
Well, from the German man that was hiding us at the time, we did hear the progress of the war. He kept up with it and he gave us hope the whole time. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the war, and it looks like they will not win. So when we looked out of the apartment where we were, and my sister said, hey, that soldier doesn't look like all the others did. And it was an American in a uniform. And I don't know if I said it before, we were out there and when they were marching in and welcoming them, and we were so happy to be finally free, because it did mean freedom for us. And that's why it's nice to live in a country like ours. We are free.
Amen.
How long from the end of the war until she got married and then come to the United States?
Yeah, how long did it take you from the end of the war to meeting your husband to going to the United States?
I met him in 1947 and got married in 1948. And 3 months after we were married, we came to the United States.
So he remained stationed there?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, many did not have places to go, couldn't go back, and so many were put into some of the same camps they were at. Some were placed in Cyprus and held there. Many tried to make it to Israel and were turned back. So it was a very difficult time. Yes, little girl in the back. How do you respond to people making jokes about the Holocaust?
I resent it very strongly. I don't know how they could make jokes about it. How can anybody joke about something like that, about murder, and being that prejudiced and that terrible? Yeah. And anybody that would make a joke about it, I don't have any respect for them.
Yeah, some people try and make the parallels with other atrocities that have happened in the world, and many atrocities have happened in the world to many groups and many people. One of the differences with this is it was targeted for elimination, for annihilation, and 2/3 of all European Jewry was killed. That's a huge number, 2/3. 50% of all world Jews were killed in a very short period of time. So the amount of time, the intensity, and the intent make it very, very unique and horrible.
I just wondered, like, what happened to the American soldiers found living skeletons when they freed camps, and I heard some died because they fed them. They didn't know about. I was wondering how would they treat someone with the living skeleton?
Yeah, he was mentioning that when the liberators, the Allies, went into the camps and found people who were really just living skeletons, so thin, and then we give them food, and so they would be hungry and gorge, and many died from that, from overeating. So the question is for Rene, it was a gradual process. She was given the potato, and so had a little bit, so it did not have that same effect.
Same effect like
You were not a skeleton because you were at least working in the factory, and then you had the person, you were only there a year, and you had that person giving you some food, so you
Yeah.
were not in the skeleton state and did not have that problem at the liberation, as some did.
Yes.
What did the factory produce? And if it was war material, did you try to sabotage what you were producing?
Okay, what did the factory that you were working at produce? Was it war materials, or what were they producing?
It was all war materials that they were manufacturing in that factory. It's the Croup Factory, the Croup dynasty, which is still in business. They still manufacture different things, not war material.
So the second part of his question was, did you or any of the ones with you try and sabotage the equipment there so it did not produce good?
Well, we worked some with the factory, but a lot of our work was really cleaning up after the bombings, the debris that was caused by the bombings. We could see when we were in the camp, we could see the bombs falling. In fact, when I was liberated and I was in the United States, and I had a baby already, and I was in the apartment by myself, and I heard all this noise like shooting. And I started packing up my daughter and getting ready to leave the apartment, and my husband came and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Don't you hear the bombs? They are shooting out there." The fireworks for the 4th of July sounded to me like it was the war going on. It scared me.
How much weight did you lose? Do you know what you weighed when you got out?
Under 100 pounds.
Under 100 pounds.
I was skin and bones.
Okay.
Now I can't lose an ounce.
In light of certain things, the Holocaust happened in 30s and 40s. Unfortunately, like this has been brought up in other things, ever since November of 2016, there's been a rather upswing of anti-Semitism, a lot of hate, where I saw a swastika painted on the side of something next to the Wawa's right here in Newport Richie, and a guy in Clearwater drives a truck with a big swastika on the back. And to me, that freaks me out. But people are driving like they don't even notice it. And I'm thinking, isn't that how it became normal the first time around?
There were many factors, and there's not exact parallels to today and here.
I'm wondering if you or any of your children have ever gone back to tour the camps. And thank you so much for speaking. It's an honor. I
The question was, have you or your children gone to the camp, back to Auschwitz or to the factory or to Bergen-Belsen?
Unfortunately, with 5 children, we were never able to afford a trip back. So I have never gone back. I wish I could have afforded it, but we didn't. Now, at one time, the German government did offer trips to Holocaust survivors to go back. There was some celebration of liberation, but it was like in April, and April was very cold in that area, and I was already 90 years old. So I declined. I couldn't go. I was not in that good a health to make that trip. But when I was younger, I say we couldn't afford it.
Yes.
Did you ever feel like you weren't gonna make it?
Okay, good question. Did you ever lose hope? Did you ever feel like you weren't going to make it?
Well, it was almost a hopeless situation when we got there. But you never lose hope. Your will of life is stronger than anything. And you hope for miracles. You hope, like we hoped that the Allies would win and we would be liberated. And thank God we were.
Okay.
How do you, did this increase your relationship with Hashem going through all this? How did it help your relationship with God? After you look back, how does it affect you and your children's relationship?
Okay, so your relationship with God prior to and during and now after has going through that experience and seeing the miracles that God did, has that increased your faith in God?
Well, I was brought up in a very religious family, observed all the holidays, but after the war and after what happened, I lost a lot of it. Because in the beginning, I was questioning God. But like I told you before, then I realized you can't blame God for what happened. It's the individuals. But I am not as religious as I was when I was growing up.
Julie?
I was wondering, when you were in the camps, I know that you probably couldn't have Bibles to pray to the Lord, to read, to keep yourself going. How did you manage to do that? Were you allowed to pray in secretly?
Okay, how did you keep your hope up and your strength up and your spirit up and your faith up through the time in imprisonment, encampment?
While we were in the camp, I think we were so tired from working and getting marching back to the factory and back to the camp. We were really didn't have much time to think of anything. And I think they also must have given us some kind of something in the bread that we were not able to think straight.
Yeah, but you did mention last night you did have signs of hope that kept you going. Having your sisters with you was helpful for you.
Well, that helped a lot, having my two friends and my sister
And the news
whole
that-
time with us.
The news that the
And I
world...
still hope that we would see our parents, even though they told us that we'll never see them again. We hope that it wasn't true, that maybe I will. And I had sometimes dreams that my mother was somewhere and I got reunited with her, but it was only a dream.
But it kept you
and-
going.
Pardon?
But it kept you going.
Yeah.
So it was a gift.
Yeah, we hope to the end that it wasn't true that they were killed.
Factory that you said is still in business, has the foundation, the company made restitution for what it was a part of, even if the owners are not.
Did the company make restitution to participating in the Holocaust?
The company?
The factory, that
Very little,
Okay.
but they made them pay us something.
I know you said you did not return back to the camps, but were you able to testify of what you saw, the atrocities with any of the trials with Eichmann and all those others that were there?
Okay, so during the trials, was she able to testify?
My sister was testifying at the Nuremberg trial. They only took one person, and it was my sister that went. And then there were several books written about what happened to us, there was a book written by William, what is his name? A kind of a famous author. And he wrote about the Croup family, Croup in arms. And one portion of it is about the camp where we were and about our escape and everything. And books were written later on too, and newspaper articles that I have some of them.
As a student, we don't really learn about the Holocaust. Like, they kind of treat it as a taboo statement. Would you wish they talked about it more?
Okay, in the schools that she's at, she's saying as a student, she's not taught much about the Holocaust. I know that we have some teachers here who have been teaching about the Holocaust, but obviously not in all scenarios and cases. And I've seen some interviews with college students who knew nothing about the Holocaust. Do you think it should be taught more?
Yes, it should be kept alive. Yeah, definitely. Because we don't want it to happen again to anybody. Any prejudice is wrong.
Yes, okay. Good question. Were you marked with a number? Tattoo, the tattoo on your arm, were you marked with a number?
No, because they planned for us to go into Germany from Auschwitz. So those people that were going into Germany, the only number we had was on our dress. But it wasn't on our arm. They didn't tattoo us.
Yeah.
The only way I still have the number is my sister worked in a place where they had the archives of all things that were happening, and she found the two, when you got to Auschwitz, they were so proper in their records that they had a thing that showed who my father was, who my mother was, how old I was. It was amazing. What did they need, all that information, if they were going to kill us? And I have that paper, and it shows the number that was given to me.
Okay, yes. While you were in the factory, did they do periodic health checks to make sure you were healthy enough to continue to work in the factory?
Did they what?
Do periodic health evaluations?
No.
Because if you weren't, they would just replace you and...
No, we had to work, clean
Yes.
up.
It's not really a question, and I'm not a descendant of any of the people that have perpetrated these wrongs or anything, but I feel like somebody should say it, and I just want to say that I
Okay, thank you very much. She wanted to apologize on behalf of all those who committed the atrocities.
Well,
We were...
there are people through centuries that are not good people. And it's up to us to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that somebody can get away with it, like Hitler did.
Thank you very much. My wife and I received a email and then followed up by a phone call from a young couple in Poland, in the Warsaw area, and she apologized in behalf of her parents, grandparents, and country for that, and they invited us to go out there. We ended up going out there and staying with them, and they took us to Auschwitz and the various different parts from Warsaw. It was very interesting. And in Krakow. They live in Krakow, right. So there is certainly people who have repented for the atrocities there.
I actually feel sorry for the children of those people that were murderers, because they have to live with it and have that on their conscience, that their parents were killers.
Good point.
Because children couldn't help it.
Very good
And
point.
children should not pay for the sins of their fathers.
Very
right?
good. Yeah, you're a theologian, I'm telling you.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for your bravery and your strength that you had. Because if it wasn't for women like you and people like you, then I would never have been born. And now I have children of my own that we can continue on bearing our Jewish heritage. And because of your strength, like I said, now I am born because of women like you and men like you, because you took the bravery you had and you made it, and we're rebuilding our Jewish heritage now.
Amen.
And like you say, it will never happen again. Now we're building it stronger and stronger every day. And I have 2 daughters now, and my grandmother was she was from Poland. She came to the United States and bared 9 children. And
Amen.
5 girls, 4 boys, and it's just to make because of women like you, your strength, we're able to build.
Amen. 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 Amen.
And I thank you.
Yeah. And so she said that she thanked you for standing, and it's because of people like you that we remain as a people today. And yes,
Thank you.
thus, in a sense, we're all survivors, and
Thank you.
we praise God for that. In light of we say never again, and that is what we move and act and work towards. But biblically, there will be atrocities even worse than we've ever seen before, is prophesied. But God will see us through again. He saw us through the Exodus in Egypt. He saw us through the Holocaust, and He will see us through to the end as well. Whether we live here or die, God will see us through. There was another hand here. Yeah.
My grandparents came to this country in 1910. My last name is Schultz. I'm sorry, but that is my last name. And I can truly say from that I knew nothing. Nothing. But I want to ask you, do you ever go to any schools? Or I worked in a prison. I retired after 38 years. I had a lady similar to you but different. She was in Buchenau, and she came and spoke to the inmates several times. The reaction was kind of across the board. Some guys, and I worked in a male prison, didn't want to accept that ever happened. But yet there was a turning point. There was also a point where guys looked at this, and she was very convincing, and she had the 6-point Star of David that her husband wore. And she talked to them, and it was like a light going on over some of their heads.
So the question is, do you speak in schools and other places as well?
Yes, I do. I go to schools whenever I'm asked. I've never refused to go speak any place because the survivors are slowly dying out.
Yes, I was saying that.
In a few years, there won't be anybody here to speak for us.
We have such a limited window to enjoy our knowledge.
And it's different for those children to read about it or to hear somebody that was actually there who's a witness.
Would you like to share your age?
And, pardon?
Would you like to share your age?
I'm 93.
93.
93 this year.
And she's
And I'm
been
still here.
and still here.
And
Amen.
I hope I'll
Amen.
be here for a while longer.
And she's been standing this whole time. Yes, and so really amazing. But at 93, and as she said, really any 14 and under, we're taken in immediately. So
Yes.
we only have a small, limit of anyone really over 80
Yeah.
that would try. Yes, way in the back there. Okay, the star that you told you had to wear. Do you still have the star that you were forced to wear?
Do I have it? We were infested with lice. So when we could clean up, we burned the clothes.
They had to burn the clothes.
It was nothing to save.
Yeah.
It was, the conditions were terrible.
Just curious, is your husband Jewish?
Is your husband Jewish?
Pardon?
Your husband, is he Jewish?
No, he wasn't Jewish.
Okay, one more last question, or two more last questions. We'll end with that, and then we'll have a couple closing songs so we can just kind of close off with a praising towards God.
Where did you move to when you went to the United States for the first time?
Where did you move when you came to the United States?
Well, my husband was from Pennsylvania, so we went to his parents. He was still in the service, so he was stationed in Washington, D.C., worked at Walter Reed Hospital, and then we moved all over the country. We have lived in Virginia, we have lived in New York, we have lived in many places.
Okay.
When you mentioned, you said something like, don't turn away, don't. I hear the stories of people back then, like the Japanese diplomat, I think Shigehara or something, who issued visas to Jewish refugees to get out, even though it could have cost him his life. And one of the most evil guys, that Herman Goering guy, he had a brother Albert, who spent his time trying to save Jews. So he had one brother trying to kill him. And I like to think that I'm hopeful that even if bad things do happen, there will be those bright stars in the sky, those people that will make a difference.
Yes, God calls us to stand up and stand for the right and not remain silent. The worst is not necessarily those who perpetrate evils, but the vast majority that remain silent. And so, yes, we need to continue to speak out and defend those who need help. Last night we gave Rene a gift. It's a CD of poems that were written by Jews during the Holocaust. Some survived, some did not survive. Some of them were found written in their diaries or scribbled on walls and other different places. And those words were then put with music, and so there's an orchestral choir that sings with Rachel Hammond. Rachel Hyman. She used to be a member here before she moved and got married and now lives in New York City. And we do have those available in our Judaic shop. So we gave that to her last night, so we want to give her a different gift tonight. So we're going to give her a copy of a book called Jewish Discoveries, which I wrote, and that is our gift here from Newport Richie to you. Thank you so much, Rene.
Okay, thank you.
And Rene will be able to stay afterwards, and you can ask her some personal questions or get your picture taken with her and her daughter afterwards.
It was my pleasure to talk to you and to see that people are still interested, and to say support Israel, because we need a country like that, and be careful that you do the things that the Holocaust never happens again.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rene.
Okay. Thank you.